Okay, this has a potential to turn into a bit of a rant or a ramble. I hope it doesn't. I hope I keep a little bit on topic here. I've made a few videos recently on the subject of morality, ultimately culminating in the point that's most important to me to get across, which was that I totally rail against this idea, whether or not you regard objective morality as even a possibility. This idea people have that, well, wouldn't it be great if we did have some objective basis for morality? I don't actually think that's a good idea. I kind of quite like the status quo that we have, but clearly there's quite a lot of people that disagree with me on that, and quite a lot of people who do aim to try and find some kind of objective structure, some objective framework on which to hang some kind of moral code. Sam Harris is somebody who's tried to do that from a secular perspective quite recently, so I'm going to be drawing, maybe aiming some questions at his idea. I haven't read his book. I've watched him talk about it, I've read about his book, I haven't read his book. I know that his basic premise is that he sees, his basic moral premise is that if it increases the well-being of sentient creatures, then that's a moral good. If it decreases their well-being, then it's a moral bad. I think that's his basic premise. I don't think I'm misquoting him there. But I see some real problems with that, and what I want to do in this video is not to dwell on the issue of whether an objective moral framework can exist, but really to look at, well, just to take on board that kind of perspective and say, well, where do we go from there? What would that actually gain us? Because it seems to me that it doesn't gain us very much at all. It seems to be just about the most futile exercise that you could engage in. I've written 3 points down here that I want to go through. The first with regard to anything that we would regard as objective, and I've made this point before, is that you've kind of nailed your flag to the mast. If you accept something's objective, you have to stick to it. But I don't think we view morality in those terms. I don't think we would want to. You know, personally, I kind of find 1 + 1 = 2 as to be a little bit stingy. It's equal 2 for such a long time now. I kind of think it's time to move on. We've had inflation elsewhere. I think it would be nice if it equaled about 2.15. Unfortunately, I can make that case as much as I like. Mathematics is an objective system, and however much I want 1 + 1 to equal 2.15, it's just hard shit. It equals 2. There's nothing I can do about it. Now, are we prepared to view morality in the same way? Are we prepared to stick with moral decisions that we're not happy with? The conclusion that I've made on that is that we're not, and that if a moral system doesn't reach the conclusions that we like, we'll just reject it. I just mentioned earlier about Sam Harris's perspective there, about things that increase well-being and things that decrease well-being. It's far too simplistic. Let me just give you an example, one that I thought of the other day, which is this. Imagine 2 people there staying in a hotel, good friends, one of them staying with their 2 children, the other one staying with his 1 child. There's a fire in the hotel. The chap who has the 1 child goes into the hotel. He's got a choice to make. He can rescue his child or he can rescue the other chap's 2 children. Would anybody say that that guy is morally wrong for rescuing his 1 child above the 2 children of the other chap? I don't think they would. I think we all understand that it's perfectly morally reasonable to value those that are closest to us more than we value other people. Admittedly, in terms of increasing well-being, saving 2 lives has more of an impact than saving 1. So what do we do here? If we've set up this system of objective morality, are we going to stick to our guns and condemn the guy for rescuing his child rather than this other chap's 2 children? Are we going to rewrite the rules? Is this whole objective system going to be objective just in the same way as a legal system's objective, and as soon as there's a little bit that we don't quite like, we just keep penciling new bits in? The next problem I have is it just seems so tragically simplistic. Why are we trying to water down? We've evolved for millions of years to reach the level of sophistication in arriving at moral decisions that we've arrived at. Any time that you have to arrive at a moral decision, there are so many factors to take into account. There's people that are going to suffer on account of that decision and people that are going to gain. It's so easy to make these kind of arguments that only ever really exist in philosophy departments or on YouTube videos, that are entirely one-sided, that only consist of suffering, that only consist in people flourishing and gains in terms of well-being. But real life scenarios are far more complicated than that. They involve a bit of both, and they also involve other ethical issues such as civil liberties. How much do we tread on people's rights to protect somebody else? We have very complicated brains that have evolved for millions of years to deal with these kinds of things, and when we arrive at a decision the way that we usually do arrive at them, we're computing dozens of factors in to make that decision. When we try and set up some kind of objective framework in this kind of a way, what we're effectively doing is throwing all of that out. What we're saying is, what can we distill this down? Is there a minimum set of things that we can have that's going to allow us to arrive at a moral decision? Well, of course there is. There's a whole slew of minimum sets of things that we could agree upon, but the problem is the decisions that we arrive at are going to be so less sophisticated than the decisions that we can arrive at just by talking and chewing through the problem in the time-honoured fashion. And that brings me on to the third point, which is related to that, which is quite simply balancing the books. Even if there is some objectivity in the kind of thing that Harris talks about, even if we could say that it's objectively bad that people suffer, that it's objectively good if people flourish, so what? You see, it seems to me that for this to have any kind of benefit whatsoever, we need to be able to assess different acts quantitatively so that we can assess them relative to one another. But you tell me, because I don't know how many broken legs equal how many broken hearts. I don't know how many orgasms I have to match up to a little bit of disapproval from the guy down the road. The best way that I know to assess these is to use this thing and all the 100 different complex factors that can be took into account at any one time. If we try and reduce, if we double distill it down to just one or two discrete points, what have we gained? The only thing we can learn from that is the blindingly obvious, which we already knew, which is that if somebody suffers, if there's something like suffering going on with no societal goods, no individual goods whatsoever happening on the other side, then that's probably something we want to avoid. If somebody's benefiting from something, having a really good time, and it's not costing anybody anything, then that's probably something we should quite like. But do we really need to be told that? Do we really need to go through this process just to show the validity of situations that never actually happen in real life? I don't think we do. So in conclusion then, what I want to say is that even if the likes of Sam Harris were right, and there is some objectivity to be found in human morality, and we can say at this extreme that this is good and that this is bad, it would still mean that 99.99999 recurring percent of decisions that we make out there in the field, real moral decisions, would still be subjective, because they would still involve more than one factor. And the decision as to how we rate one factor against another is still entirely subjective. We've gained absolutely nothing by any of the process. All we've done is adopted a set of standards that's so much more simplistic and so less worthy of what we're able to attain than what we can do if we just use this thing here. I don't mean my fingers, by the way, I mean our brains. Anyway, that's all I've got to say on this. Thank you for watching this slightly ranty video. I am having a beer while I'm making it, that's probably why. Thank you for watching, bye for now.